You've been taught your whole life that debt is bad, right? Get out of debt. Pay off your credit cards. Never borrow money. Your parents probably drilled this into your head. And look, they meant well. But here's the thing. They were talking about the wrong kind of debt, because right now, the wealthiest people on the planet are using debt to build their fortunes. And I'm not talking about credit card debt or personal loans for a new car. I'm talking about strategic debt, the kind that actually makes you rich while everyone else is broke. And today, we're going to break down exactly how this works, because understanding this one concept could literally change the trajectory of your entire financial life. My name is Jackson, and I spend way too much time thinking about debt, like an embarrassing amount. I've read about how Elon Musk uses leverage, how real estate investors use mortgages as wealth multiplication tools, how successful entrepreneurs use business debt to scale faster than they ever could on cash alone. And if you're someone who's been told that all debt is bad, or someone who wants to finally understand why rich people seem to break all the financial rules and still win, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because what we're about to cover is not what your finance teacher told you. Okay, let's start with the bad news, because you need to understand what not to do before we talk about what actually works. Right now, the average American household is carrying about $6,929 in credit card debt. That's just credit cards, not counting car loans, student loans, or mortgages. The average person with credit card debt is paying somewhere between 18% and 22% in interest annually. Here's what most people don't realize: they're essentially renting money from the bank, and the rent keeps going up. Let me show you what this actually looks like. Say you've got a $5,000 credit card balance at 20% APR. If you only make minimum payments, let's say $150 a month, you're going to pay nearly $4,000 in interest alone before that debt is gone. You're paying $9,000 total for $5,000 in spending. That's insane. But here's the psychological part that nobody talks about: your brain doesn't feel that. When you swipe a credit card, there's no physical money leaving your hand. Studies show that people spend 23% more when they use credit versus cash. Your brain literally can't feel the pain of the purchase, so you spend more. Now, the credit card companies know this. That's why they push these products so hard. They make money when you don't pay attention to your spending. They make money when you carry a balance. They make money when you only pay minimums. And most people, I'd say 65% of Americans, are trapped in this exact cycle. They're making purchases, not thinking about the cost, carrying a balance, paying massive interest, and then wondering why they're broke at the end of the month. This is consumer debt. This is the bad debt. And it's specifically designed to make you poorer while enriching the bank. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Most personal finance advice stops here. They tell you to cut up your credit cards, never borrow money, and save aggressively. And yes, getting out of bad debt is important. But the problem is, this advice misses something crucial: some of the richest people in the world are heavily in debt. Like, billions of dollars in debt. And they're getting richer, not poorer. So what's the difference? Here's the line nobody crosses in personal finance education: the difference between consumer debt and productive debt. Consumer debt is money you borrow to buy something that goes down in value or that you consume. Credit cards, car loans for a depreciating asset, and personal loans for a vacation. The asset loses value or disappears, but the debt remains. That's a wealth killer. Productive debt is money you borrow to buy something that generates income or goes up in value. Here's the critical part: the asset you buy with the debt makes more money than the debt costs you. Let me give you a real example, because the math here is what actually changes people's lives. Let's say you're thinking about buying a rental property. The property costs $200,000. Instead of saving up $200,000, which would take you, let's say, 15 years if you're aggressive, you put down 20%, which is $40,000. You borrow $160,000 at 4.5% interest. Your monthly payment on that mortgage is about $810. But here's the thing: the tenant pays you $1,400 a month in rent. So you're actually making $590 a month. That's $7,080 a year, just from the difference between what you borrowed and what the property generates. Plus, you're building equity. The property is likely to appreciate. You're not paying the full cost of the debt, the tenant is paying most of it for you. Now compare that to a car loan. You borrow $30,000 for a car at 6% interest. Your monthly payment is $560. The car depreciates about 15% per year. It generates zero income. You're just paying interest on an asset that's worth less every single day. Same debt structure. Completely different outcome. One makes you rich. One makes you broke. And here's what most people don't realize: this isn't luck. This isn't something only rich people can do. This is just understanding how debt actually works. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Jackson, but I don't have $40,000 for a down payment. I can barely pay my credit card bill. I hear that. But this is exactly why understanding this concept matters, because it changes how you think about your money going forward. Here's the thing: most people think debt is binary. Either you have it or you don't, and it's always bad. But the wealthy think about debt as a tool. And like any tool, it can build you a mansion or destroy your house. Now let me show you something that will blow your mind. Jeff Bezos has personal debt, but Amazon has massive corporate debt. Elon Musk's net worth is in the hundreds of billions, and he's constantly leveraging debt to scale his businesses. These are people who are broke or struggling. They understand that if you borrow money at 4% interest and invest it in something that returns 10%, you're making a 6% profit on money that isn't yours. That's wealth multiplication. That's the secret. Let me show you the math of this more clearly. Say you have $100,000 in cash. You could invest it conservatively and make 6 to 7% per year. That's $6,000 to $7,000. Good for you. But what if you borrowed an additional $200,000 at 4% interest? Now you have $300,000 to invest. If that $300,000 makes 7%, that's $21,000. You subtract the $8,000 you're paying in interest on the borrowed money, and you've made $13,000. You made almost double the money using someone else's capital. This is leverage. And this is how generational wealth is built. According to a study by Northwestern Mutual, 69% of millionaires have mortgages. These are people who paid for their homes in cash. They borrowed money, invested it strategically, and that debt is part of their wealth-building equation. Meanwhile, most regular people are avoiding all debt, even good debt, because they've been scared by personal finance gurus who don't understand the difference between consumer debt and productive debt. Now, here's where it gets psychological. And this is the part that actually determines whether you'll ever build wealth or not. There's something called debt aversion, and it's powerful. Most people feel guilt about debt. They feel like borrowing money is morally wrong. And that guilt actually stops them from making smart financial decisions. Where does this come from? Usually, it comes from parents or mentors who were traumatized by bad debt. Maybe your parents had credit card debt. Maybe they lost their house. And so they taught you that all debt is bad. You internalize that message. And now, even when debt could work for you, you avoid it because of that emotional block. But here's the thing: emotions are terrible financial advisors. The wealthiest people I've studied, they don't feel guilty about productive debt. They feel strategic about it. They ask 3 questions. 1. Is this debt being used to buy something that generates income or appreciates? 2. Is the return on what I'm buying higher than the interest rate I'm paying? 3. Can I comfortably afford the payments if things go wrong? If all 3 answers are yes, they borrow. If not, they don't. It's mathematical, not emotional. Here's a fascinating stat: people with no debt actually tend to have lower net worth than people with strategic debt. The reason? Debt-averse people are so scared of owing money that they avoid the investments that would build their wealth. They save cash, but cash doesn't multiply. Meanwhile, people who use debt strategically are borrowing at 3 to 4% to invest in assets returning 8 to 10%. Who's going to be richer in 20 years? It's not close. Now, I'm not saying go borrow money recklessly. That's not the point. The point is that if you have a psychological block against all debt, you're handicapping your financial future. I had a friend who was offered a $50,000 business loan at 5% interest. The business he wanted to start would generate about $8,000 to $10,000 a month in profit. But he turned it down because debt scared him. A year later, someone else started the same business with borrowed money and is now making $120,000 a year. My friend is still working his job. That emotional block cost him literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, so if you want to actually use debt to build wealth, here's the practical playbook. This is not a theory. This is what actually works. Step 1. Know your debt math. Before you borrow a single dollar, you need to understand the numbers. What's the interest rate? What are you buying? What will it generate in return? Let me give you a framework. If you're looking at debt, ask yourself, is the return on this investment at least 2 to 3% higher than the interest rate? If you're borrowing at 4% for a rental property that returns 7 to 8%, that's good debt. If you're borrowing at 5% for a business that returns 15%, that's excellent debt. But if you're borrowing at 6% for a car that depreciates, that's bad debt. The math doesn't work. Step 2. Separate your debt categories. This is crucial. You want to mentally and financially separate your productive debt from any consumer debt you might have. Your consumer debt, credit cards, car loans, personal loans, that's the enemy. The interest rate is high, and the asset doesn't generate income. Kill this aggressively. I don't care if you have to live like you're broke for a year to get rid of it. This debt is stealing your future. Your productive debt, mortgages, business loans, investment loans, that's different. This is working for you. You don't need to attack this the same way. In fact, you might actually extend the term to free up cash for other investments. This is counterintuitive, I know. Most financial advice tells you to pay off all debt as fast as possible. But if you have a mortgage at 3.5% and investment opportunities returning 8%, paying off the mortgage faster is actually a mistake. You're giving up returns. Step 3. Only borrow for things that generate income. This is the gate. This is the filter. If you're thinking about borrowing money, ask, does this asset generate income, or does it go up in value? If it does neither, don't borrow. Save and pay cash. Real estate? Good borrowing candidate. Businesses? Good. Investments? Good. Education that increases your earning power? Arguably good. A car, furniture, a vacation? Bad borrowing candidates. This filter will eliminate 90% of consumer debt temptations right there. Step 4. Build your credit. If you want to access good debt, you need good credit. This is boring, but it's essential. Pay everything on time. Keep your credit utilization below 30%. Don't close old credit card accounts. Your credit score is literally the interest rate discount code for your entire life. A person with a 750 plus credit score and a person with a 650 credit score borrowing for the same mortgage might have a 1.5 to 2% difference in interest rates. On a $300,000 mortgage, that's the difference between paying $400,000 and $500,000 over 30 years. Your credit score is worth 6 figures. Treat it that way. Step 5. Start small. Look, you don't need to borrow $200,000 tomorrow. You can start with something small. Maybe you borrow money to take a course that increases your earning power. Maybe you borrow to start a side business. Maybe you make an investment on a small scale. The point is to get comfortable with the mechanics of good debt. Because here's what happens, once you've borrowed money for something productive and you've seen it work, your psychology shifts. You stop being debt averse. You start being debt strategic. And that's when things accelerate. Now, before you run out and borrow a bunch of money, I need to give you a reality check. Because debt is powerful, and powerful tools can hurt you if you're not careful. The risk, if you borrow money and things go wrong, the investment fails, the business doesn't work, the income stops, you still owe the debt. You're not paying for an asset anymore, you're just paying interest on something worthless. This is why you need an emergency fund before you take on productive debt. This is why you need to be able to afford the payments even if the investment return is zero. The temptation, once you understand good debt, it's easy to get greedy. Well, if borrowing at 4% to invest at 7% works, what if I borrow at 7% to invest at 10%? What if I leverage 10x? This is how people blow up. This is how you end up in a situation where one bad investment tanks you. The wealthy people who use debt strategically, they're also the most conservative with their leverage. They borrow, yes, but they also have massive safety margins. They borrow less than they can afford. They invest in things they understand. They don't get greedy. The truth, good debt will get you rich if you execute it correctly. But there are no guarantees. You can do everything right and still fail. What you're doing is tilting the odds in your favor, not creating a sure thing. So approach it with respect. Approach it with humility. And approach it with a plan. Because if you don't have a plan, debt, even good debt, can ruin you. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Most people think there are two financial states, debt, which is bad, or no debt, which is good. But that's not how the world actually works. The world works like this: there's bad debt, which is a wealth killer. There's no debt, which is safe. And there's good debt, which is a wealth multiplier. If you want to stay middle class, avoid all debt and save aggressively. That's fine. You'll be stable. But if you want to build wealth, you have to understand debt. You have to use it strategically. You have to separate the productive from the destructive. And once you do that, once you shift your mindset from debt is bad to I need to use debt intelligently, everything changes. Because suddenly, you're not constrained by your current cash. You're constrained by your ability to find good investments. And for most people, that's a much, much larger constraint. So the question isn't whether you should use debt. The question is whether you'll learn to use it right. And that, my friend, is how the debt that should make you scared actually makes you rich. If this video helped you understand debt differently, drop a like right now. And if you want more videos breaking down the financial secrets that actually build wealth, not the stuff they teach in schools, but the stuff that works, make sure you're subscribed. I post new videos every single week, and honestly, each one is designed to change how you think about money. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's build wealth together. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.